Good morning. I'm delighted to be here with you today. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, great. My name is Shannon Manders. I'm the editorial director at GTR Global Trade Review. As some of you will know, we're a specialist trade finance publication and events company. Super excited to be moderating this discussion on supporting a fair and inclusive workplace. It's a conversation, I think, that couldn't be more timely or more necessary. So kudos to BAFT for putting it front and center of the agenda. Over the last year or so, we've seen a growing pressure on inclusion efforts across industries. In some regions, diversity and inclusion initiatives have been rebranded, they've been scaled back, or they've been quietly sidelined. In others, they're being reshaped to reflect an evolving workplace reality. And yet the business case, of course, as you guys probably already know, remains undeniable. So inclusive leadership, diverse perspectives, and really resilient talent pipelines are absolutely critical to long-term success, and never more so than in the transaction banking space, which is, as you know, the very heart of global growth and development. So this session is really about cutting through all of that noise and taking a look at what does inclusion actually look like on a day-to-day basis in practice. It's about recognizing the diversity of experience across not only gender, and we're going to get to some stats in a minute, but also race, culture, geography, generation, neurological conditions, of course, career stage, etc., and asking how we can build workplaces that genuinely value these differences. So yeah, like I said, we're going to talk about some stats that we have. So GTR ran the industry's first ever gender diversity in trade finance survey towards the end of last year. So we have some of those stats. But from these amazing people, we're going to be hearing about the realities that they're facing as leaders in transaction banking, the strategies that are working, and maybe some that aren't, as well as the barriers that still remain. So yeah, I'm delighted to welcome this fantastic panel, and I'm going to start off by asking the panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and also just to give a little bit of an overview in terms of how you interpret inclusion, either professionally or personally. And maybe Nick, we'll start there and we'll work our way.
Okay, good. I'm Nick Smith. I head the financial institution activity for banks in the Americas, and more recently also banks globally for ING. ING is a Dutch bank, for those that don't know. So to give you an illustration of inclusion, I was going to use an experience of my life just to give you a feel for what it means to me. So I grew up in South Africa, and I've just found out, Shannon as well, some other people in the administration as well. So we kind of did that don't ask, don't tell thing until I was late in my 20s, very much aware that I'm gay. Got a job finally with ING, and then bought a house immediately, as all South Africans do. You buy a house, you kind of try and settle down. So I wanted my colleagues to come and see the house, and I have to tell you, I've been together with my partner for 30 years, and we've been married now for 18 years. So Francho was there, and I said to Francho, listen, tonight, my colleagues are coming, don't ask, don't tell, you gotta go to the movies or the theater, and then by 10 o'clock, you can saunter back to see if the lights are, and then you can come in. And we did that, and the next day my boss called me in. And I was like, oh, what happened? Because we had our names on the front door, Nick Smith and Francho Conradi. And my boss said, this is the Netherlands, you don't have to hide the fact that you're gay. And I just melted and sank off my chair and didn't know how to respond. But I thought, that has stuck with me my whole life. He wasn't even my best boss. But he reached out to me to say, you don't have to hide yourself. You can bring your whole self to work. And it has given me self-confidence about that for my whole life, just that one experience. So that's what inclusion means to me.
Brilliant, thanks, Nick. Priya?
Hard to come back from that one. No, it's hard to top that story. But for me, I'm Priya Raghavan. I lead the financial institutions team in the US for BBVA. I've been fortunate in that I've had some really supportive bosses for a really long time in my career. I started in banking in 2008, and so like anyone who started in banking in 2008, I started in workouts. And so I started with a very gruff, old school MD, very experienced, and I was an associate trying to figure out what to do. And we were working on models. Of course, the model was entirely my problem. And we would go into meetings, and I wouldn't expect to talk. And I do a lot of these presentations, so people who know me know that I'm an introvert, and I won't necessarily come out and do this. But early on in my career, I didn't have the confidence to speak up and say I wanted to talk in a client meeting. But this old school MD knew I'd worked my backside off, and he would call on me on these meetings and make me speak. And he knew that I'd worked on the model, knew the numbers inside out. And so to me, inclusivity is about empowerment. It's about making sure that no matter how shy you might be, how diffident you might be, you have the ability and the courage to speak up. And that's a broad comment, right? It is hard to speak up about everything, but to know that you're supported and encouraged to do it is probably one of the most important things to me.
Thanks, Priya. Leigh, go ahead.
Hey guys, I'm Leigh Amaro. I'm head of North America for Swift. I'll tell a few more personal stories as we get into some of the questions, so I'll keep this one a little short. But for me, inclusivity is not so much just having a seat around the table. Everyone talks about, oh, you have a seat at the table, or women have a seat at the table. It's more about that feeling of being heard, respected, and empowered to speak at the table. It's not just having a seat there. It's that your views are welcomed and encouraged by leadership. So that's what inclusivity means to me.
Thanks, Leigh. James.
Thank you. So I'm James Rausch. I head up our global transaction banking business at Royal Bank of Canada. I'm a gay male as well. I'll just mention, I guess, cultivating young talent is a passion of mine, and I just completing a master's in positive psychology, and through that process did a master's thesis on young gay finance professionals. So really passionate about how to increase inclusion in the industry. And I think for me, inclusion, I'll echo everything that my panelists have said, that it's more than just sort of looking across your teams and putting people into visible boxes, and many aspects of diversity can't be seen, like neurodiversity or whether or not you're gay or not. But it's really about creating safe spaces and creating that psychological safety, because that ultimately, when we talk about bringing our true selves to work, it's really being able to bring that diversity of thought and experience to everything that we do. And as we'll talk about in the panel, there's real advantages to cultivating workplaces like that. And that's sort of our challenge and everyone's challenge as leaders or coworkers, is how do we create those safe spaces?
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, James. And thanks to you all. Really fantastic to hear your personal views of how you're approaching the conversation. Now, just a heads up to the audience, we're going to be using the Slido app. We have 3 pretty cool questions, I think. So just make sure you've got the app. I know it takes like a couple of seconds to open it, but we've got a few questions for the audience, and we're going to come to the first Slido question in a sec. And we are hoping to keep this as interactive as possible. It does feel weird that we're asking the question why in the year 2025, but Leigh, tell us, why is it that building a fair and inclusive workplace in transaction banking actually matters? How does it impact the broader business?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So McKinsey for the last 10 years has done a study every single year around diversity in the workforce. It's a fantastic read. It's on their website. Encourage you to download it. There's a couple of really cool stats because they've got 10 years worth of data and they can track those trends. So let me just share a couple. This drives to like why it's so important to business. It's a competitive advantage to be inclusive in business. So here's a first stat. Companies that prioritize inclusion see up to 39% greater likelihood of outperforming peers on profitability. 39%. Why is that? Because if you have diversity of thought around the table, you're going to avoid groupthink. If you have diversity of thought around the table, you're going to get more creativity, innovation, and trust when it comes to solving some of those key problems that we all face in our day-to-day business lives. A couple of other things that came out of the study. Number one, better decision-making. Inclusive companies are 36% more likely to demonstrate strong decision-making capabilities. And number two, which I think is really compelling because it speaks to all of us up here, is acquisition of talent and new customers. And so if you lead with inclusive culture, you're more likely, the data shows over 10 years, you're more likely to attract and retain the best talent. One of the sound bites within the McKinsey study said over 70% of women consider inclusive commitments by the company when evaluating job opportunities. And further, the study went further and talked about the clients. The clients that want to partner with Swift, with my panelists up here, also look for what does RBC do with inclusivity? What does ING do with inclusivity? So those are some of the key drivers. And then one last thing, it's interesting to see where it's going. My daughter is a freshman in college. We actually move her out in 2 weeks. It's gone by very fast. And so she's starting to get outreaches from actually many of the folks that are in the room. And it's so different from when we entered the workforce. Those outreaches, the emails you get like, come to my, coffee chat, they're leading with inclusivity. Come hear about our women's group. Come hear about our neurodiversity group. Come hear about our Hispanic group. And so it's fascinating to see how they're using the data to adjust that next generation and the recruiting things that are important to them.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Leigh. I mean, it's great to hear those stats, but one thing that we've noticed is that the language is evolving, and I don't know how important that is. So you guys tell me, Nick. DEI, quote unquote, is being scaled back in some regions, and it's being reframed in others. Do you think that the word inclusion, quote unquote, resonates more with employers and with leaders?
So I just have to say that this is not necessarily the view of ING, which I never would have to say in the past, and this is my personal view.
It's a spicy question.
It's a spicy question. It's not a difficult question. I do not think that inclusion or diversity needs to be changed by organizations. I think equity is a loaded word. I think that legally, equity is maybe even incorrectly, but it is associated with affirmative action. I think affirmative action has a timeout. And I think in most of our societies, that timeout has already happened. Therefore, I think that the noise is around that equity portion. Is that affirmative action? Does it mean affirmative action? I don't think that most of our gender, sexual orientation groups, racial background need affirmative action anymore. We are at a stage where we can move forward. And I think that's the main point, is that affirmative action and woke got confused with each other. Does that mean that equity, that inclusion and diversity also needs to be taken off the agenda? Absolutely not. I think that, and I actually see the companies reaffirming inclusion. Maybe not diversity, but most companies now kind of huddle around inclusion. I think it's not that they're changing what they're doing, they're just being careful legally. And I mean, we know why, right? The legal environment has become super aggressive around it. So I'm not seeing a change really, I'm seeing a nuance around the word equity and affirmative action.
Okay, brilliant. I think now would be a great time to take the first Slido question and get the audience involved. Really keen to get your guys' view. So this first question is kind of based around, has DEI passed us by? So how would you guys describe your organization's current approach to inclusion and diversity? Is it expanding initiatives? Is it maintaining existing programs? Is it scaling back due to external pressures? Is it no longer a focus? Oh boy, that scares me. And E, is it I don't know? Let's take like half a minute just to try and get, I think this is quite vital statistics to gather. So let's take a sec to get the responses there. And then I'm going to come to you guys on the panel and see if you're surprised. Well, I'm glad that no longer a focus has come down to like 1%. That's a relief. Maintaining existing programs, but not necessarily expanding. James, Priya, anybody want to get involved? Like, are you nervous? Does this give you hope?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say I'm nervous. I think it's important to put this in sort of just a broader historical context, right? And so things change over time. I was in a sort of a panel discussion a month or so ago with somebody that's been in the DEI space for decades, and she kind of said to me that, you know, the names change, right? Like how we call things change over time. And I think it's important, well, at least for me, to reflect on why is there a backlash, right? Why has there been a pushback around certain terms, around perhaps the way the movement has approached certain things, and there's learnings in it for us. But the fundamental, I think, truth from a business perspective or a life truth in terms of like just being, hoping that the people that you work with feel safe to bring their true selves to work and be able to voice their opinions, I think that remains. And this, this woman also said to me, it's like, I often say to people, it's like a ramp. You know, who's against a ramp for somebody in a wheelchair? Well, that's a DEI program for some, right? And so I think if we forget or we put aside some of the noise and actually focus on, you know, sort of what's at the core of what we're hoping to do, then it's not as scary for me. We have to obviously work within the environment that we're in.
And I'll just add, there is no harm in revisiting how we talk about the important things, because with time, our messaging has to evolve and how we say things matters. So if we're not constantly adapting it to how people want to hear the message, we're not generating a message that is accessible to everyone. And so it is a relief to me that maintaining was the majority, and it is also refreshing to know that there is some revitalized growth in some components.
Yeah. Let's talk for a minute about this kind of fear of falling foul of, shall we say, political winds. As James, as leaders within the within the industry, how do the people in the audience continue to push for diversity and inclusion within the organization, within their teams, when we have this kind of riskiness about even talking about this subject in a public forum? Like, what are the strategies that are working and that can continue to work?
Yeah, so I think a few things, sorry, I'm losing my voice, but again, as I said, I think it's important to listen and so to understand or try to understand why there's some pushback. But for me, it really, I reflect on what difference I can make, because I've often joked, it's like, what has a DEI program done for me? I'm not exactly sure, to be honest, and maybe it has helped create a safer space for me. But I reflect on what can I do to make sure that I'm trying to change, move the dial in terms of ensuring that I'm building safe spaces, diverse spaces for my staff to work in. And for me, that begins with me understanding that, you know, I have biases that I bring into everything that I do, that as a human, I'm sort of programmed neurologically to look for safety and look for similarities and really challenge myself and challenge my team to be much more broader in thinking and challenge the ways that we do things. And so that could be like if we're recruiting for summer students and then I look at the pool of talent that we get in, if that doesn't match the communities that I'm serving, then as a leader I should ask why. And I may not have a solution for that, but it's understanding and realizing that maybe there's things that we're doing that could be done in slightly different ways that can make our workplaces more diverse and more effective.
Yeah. Leigh, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to try and roll the first two questions from the audience into one, because it kind of sticks with what James has been talking about, which is like how, as leaders, do you continue to lead on this topic? So the first question is, as evidenced by the number of conference attendees who left the room, I imagine that they all needed to visit the bathroom or have a glass of water. How do we convince leadership and our colleagues that this is an important topic worthy of their attention and holding space for others? And then, yeah, actually, let's leave it on that one. Like, how do we convince leadership and our colleagues to stay in the room and at the table?
Yeah, I think taking a small step back, in industries where you're kind of governed by what you would call like traditional leadership, which I define that as a hierarchical leader, a leader that is maybe leaders that are kind of homogeneous and are resistant to change. We really, which is why they should, some people should come back in the room, we really need to redefine what leadership means. And what leadership means is it's less around, you know, combative, coercive leadership, and it's more to the word you used, which is psychological safety. It's really critical for the future leaders to create something that's a psychologically safe environment. I did not make up that word. That is a word used by Adam Grant. I'm sure many in the room follow Adam Grant. He's a famous professor at Wharton. And the theme there is it's more around, by creating psychological safety, you're going to drive less groupthink, and again, more creativity and innovation and trust in the room. And I'll give an example that maybe we'll repeat it at the lunch so everyone hears it. If you guys remember, and it's an Adam Grant example, but if you remember back in 2010 when the horrible Chilean gold mine crashed, remember it had a horrible accident, and 33 miners were stuck underground. Terrible. The CEO flies in, his big engineers fly in, they come into Chile, we have to fix this, get his direct reports in the room, and they struggle. And you know, all the data showed that there's no way these people are going to survive. There's not a way to crack that rock fast enough to get them out. And the CEO got very vulnerable and said, I need every idea in the room. I need everyone to come to the table. I don't care if you sweep the tent till you're the most senior engineer. You will come, you will sit with me, and you will give me all your ideas. The person that got those miners out in 69 days was one of the most junior people that worked in that mine, because that CEO, that leader, was vulnerable and opened up to all ideas and created that psychological safety so everyone felt safe to, you know, share that feedback. So I think that, to me, is one of the things that's critical for leadership and inclusiveness.
Yeah, thanks. Please.
Maybe I can add on. So in my mind, I've had, because it was interesting preparing for this whole session, right? How your organization react to it. I find, how do you react to questioning around inclusion? Let's use the word inclusion. First of all, you have to look for your allies. So nobody will question that 50% of our population consists of women, right? We need to have women working as much as possible in our organizations to have efficient societies. What women have done for equal pay is incredible. The resources we have in the world fighting for equal pay for equal work has been achieved by women's organizations. We need to support them. That's an ally. People of color, they're allies. When we add those allies together, we're a majority. And I can't imagine that one administration would go against that. You have Scott Bessent. He's an openly gay person. He's the first Treasury Secretary that's openly gay. So I think you need to look where your allies are. Even in the administration, go and look up your allies. It's hard, go and do it. And then the second part is, and that I'm just coming back to the points that Leigh were making, right? You have to lead with profitability. You can't lead with saying like, oh, because I'm gay, you have to accept me. You have to say, you have to employ me as a gay person because I can access that gay pink dollar that loves to go on holiday and spends like crazy. And normally in a bell curve, guess where's the gays? They're in that 25% innovators. They're the first ones that got that app downloaded and busy working on that app. So you have to sell it from a profitability perspective to your organization. So those were the two things, allies and profitability.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. And I think I'm going to come on to the results of the Gender Diversity in Trade Finance survey in a second, because we actually asked people about their organization's gender pay parity policy. That's a lot of P's. And the very scary thing there is that most of them didn't actually know if such a policy exists.
Wow.
But I think now is a really good time to gauge people's feelings. So can we have the second Slido question on the screen, please? So this is a question that asks you to describe your current feelings about the inclusion landscape within your institution or the broader industry. So recognizing that you guys may be based in the US or elsewhere. So there's actually 5 options there, but you can only see 3 on the screen. But the first is frustrated. It feels like we're losing momentum. The second is cautiously optimistic. So things are shifting, but there's still commitment and room for progress. Third is disillusioned. It feels like inclusion is being deprioritized. Fourth is motivated. So the changing climate has strengthened my resolve to speak out and drive change. And the fifth is neutral. I haven't noticed a change in directional emphasis. Okay, so we're not seeing anybody who's frustrated. Oh, we're seeing a few that are frustrated. That's a shame. But cautiously optimistic. Things are shifting, but there's still commitment and room for progress. And then kind of balanced by the neutrality of haven't noticed a change in direction or emphasis. Anybody from the panel want to chime in there? How do you feel, Priya?
I feel cautiously optimistic. I always believe that there is an opportunity to message change, to bring change, and no matter what, we can find positive in it.
Brilliant. If we may, just for like 2 minutes, I'm going to breeze through these survey stats. Everybody, there are going to be a lot of numbers on the screen. Just listen to my voice. Let it guide you. Take a deep breath. Could I have the results of the survey on the screen? So this is a survey that GTR ran towards the end of last year, so ahead of the so-called changing political winds that we have been seeing. We had about 300 odd responses from the global trade finance community, and this was across banks, insurers, fintech providers, lawyers, etc. So I think fairly representative of the community. So the data that you're seeing in the first 2 charts here, oh, and just by the way, GTR is going to publish a full report of this in the next issue, so drop me a line and I'll send it to you. You don't have to like squint your eyes to try and see what those numbers are. But basically what we found is that for years we've been talking about how there's this persistent gender imbalance with women in senior trade finance leadership roles. And unfortunately, the data kind of bears out that result. It's true. Women are disproportionately represented in junior and back office positions within the world of trade finance, with far fewer in senior leadership roles. Most strikingly, nearly half of the respondents, nearly 47% of people, said that women only hold 0 to 5% of C-suite positions. I think reinforcing this systemic lack of female leadership. Next slide, please. We asked people to rate the gender diversity within their trade finance organizations specifically. So we had a good number, so sort of average. People that rated average or good were about 75%, but we had 13% of people giving it a negative rating, and 12% saw it as excellent. So highlighting certainly room for improvement, particularly as men tended to view diversity more positively than women. And that's not a cheap shot at men. I think it's just more that maybe women aren't having these conversations with their male colleagues. Next slide, please. We asked people about their awareness. This speaks to what Nick was talking about in terms of, and their compliance, awareness and compliance with regulations and policies, both internally within their organizations and externally. And what we found is, as I said, nearly 45% of respondents didn't actually know if their organization has a gender pay parity policy. I'm not going to come to all the numbers there, but I mean, the point is, if employees, especially women, aren't aware of the policies, they can't advocate for equal